Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, S-H-O-W, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Hello, America. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, 877-973-7425. I am back after yesterday, minus part of my jaw and a tooth. Well, I shouldn't say part of a jaw, just the tissue around my jaw. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, and some of you who were and you emailed and thought you were crazy, I went to the doctor. So I've had a headache since Thursday and finally went to the doctor on Monday. The doctor said, I think it might be your jaw. You need to go to the dentist. So I got to the dentist at 8 a.m. yesterday. They took 2 x-rays, immediately called an oral surgeon and said, you got to have emergency surgery. You have an infection in your jaw, and those are really bad. And I mean, I thought, okay. And then the oral surgeon called and said, look, we're going to call you and you'll have about 20 minutes to get to the hospital, and we'll get set up for you. And so I started my show, and at 12:50, they called and left me a voicemail. I didn't even get it until 1 o'clock. So at 1 o'clock, we had to go to tape, and I had to go to the hospital and have my rear left molar extracted, and then a portion of tissue that they said was dying and infected, cut out of the back of my jaw. So I'm here. I'm not on painkillers. I'm bleeding. I keep spitting blood, but I'm okay. It's not bad, and this is normal, they said, with recovery. I don't really hurt a lot. My jaw is swollen. It's a little puffy. If you see me on like the live stream, you can kind of tell I'm a little swollen, but I'm fine. And it is June 6th, and I need to begin the show not with a bunch of political monologue, but with this.
We're here to mark that day in history when the Allied armies joined in battle to reclaim this continent to liberty. For 4 long years, much of Europe had been under a terrible shadow. Free nations had fallen. Jews cried out in the camps. Millions cried out for liberation. Europe was enslaved, and the world prayed for its rescue. Here in Normandy, the rescue began. Here, the Allies stood and fought against tyranny in a giant undertaking unparalleled in human history. We stand on a lonely, windswept point on the northern shore of France. The air is soft, but 40 years ago at this moment, the air was dense with smoke and the cries of men, and the air was filled with the crack of rifle fire and the roar of cannon. At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. Their mission was one of the most difficult and daring of the invasion: to climb these sheer and desolate cliffs and take out the enemy guns. The Allies had been told that some of the mightiest of these guns were here, and they would be trained on the beaches to stop the Allied advance. The Rangers looked up and saw the enemy soldiers at the edge of the cliffs shooting down at them with machine guns and throwing grenades, and the American Rangers began to climb. They shot rope ladders over the face of these cliffs and began to pull themselves up. When one Ranger fell, another would take his place. When one rope was cut, a Ranger would grab another and begin his climb again. They climbed, shot back, and held their footing. Soon, one by one, the Rangers pulled themselves over the top And in seizing the firm land at the top of these cliffs, they began to seize back the continent of Europe. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. And behind me is a memorial that symbolizes the ranger daggers that were thrust into the top of these cliffs. And before me are the men who put them there. These are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. And these are the heroes who helped end a war. Gentlemen, I look at you and I think of the words of Stephen Spender's poem. You were men who in your, quote, lives fought for life and left the vivid air signed with your honor. I think I know what you may be thinking right now. Thinking we were just part of a bigger effort. Everyone was brave that day. Well, everyone was. Do you remember the story of Bill Millen of the 51st Highlanders? 40 years ago today, British troops were pinned down near a bridge waiting desperately for help. Suddenly they heard the sound of bagpipes, and some thought they were dreaming. Well, they weren't. They looked up and saw Bill Millen with his bagpipes leading the reinforcements and ignoring the smack of the bullets into the ground around him. Lord Lovat was with him, Lord Lovat of Scotland, who calmly announced when he got to the bridge, "Sorry, I'm a few minutes late," as if he'd been delayed by a traffic jam, when in truth he'd just come from the bloody fighting on Sword Beach, which he and his men had just taken.
That was Ronald Reagan in 1984 on the 40th anniversary of D-Day. And here we are 40 years later, the 80th anniversary. His speech, I play it on D-Day because it's considered, even by Democrats, the gold standard. In fact, even the news commentary today about Joe Biden before his speech was about how not to expect him to live up to Ronald Reagan's. Now, if you will humor me here for just a moment, I try to do this every year so you get a sense of what was going on at the time. Several years ago, I went into National Archives and was able to extract audio of the reporters broadcasting from the beach and on the ships headed to D-Day. And let's just spend a few moments here on the 80th anniversary respecting and honoring what actually happened with this audio.
This is London. London calling in the home, overseas, and European services of the BBC and through United Nations Radio Mediterranean. And this is John Snagg speaking. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, have just issued communique number 1, and in a few seconds I will read it to you. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France. I'll repeat that communique. Communique number 1. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
It's 20 minutes to 8 in the evening, a matter now of only a few hours to H hour. At any time now, we may see action. At any moment, the German advanced defenses may come into play. And so, while we steam steadily along a course that's carrying us south towards the Seine, I'm taking this chance of recording. At noon today, we raised anchor, and we were ready to go. Slowly and majestically, as minesweepers and destroyers curved their way into position, we gave the lead to the other transports. Under a gray sky, we looked at the coast of Britain and watched it slowly grow more dim. On the decks and in the holds, the soldiers were waiting. For the most part, standing about, looking out to sea, talking now and then, and thinking. In the wardroom, dinner. From the menu, soup, roast beef and green peas, and apples and cream. It might have been a crossing to Cherbourg in peacetime. And then you realized that your hand was moving just a little sluggishly to your mouth. Your tummy wasn't just where it usually was. The men around you were rather silent, and when they spoke, they were self-conscious. It was a room full of men on the way, wondering, waiting and listening. On deck, signals were flashing between ships. Enterprise had run up a flag signal. Boat crews were making their final preparations. There was a tenseness and a sense of good humor and good fellowship.
This is Alan Melville, Dispatch 13, 2100 hours, 6th of June, from the beach west of Ouistreham. The paratroops are landing. They're landing all around me as I speak. They've come in from the sea, and they're fluttering down, red, white, and blue parachutes fluttering down, and they're just about the best thing that we've seen for a good many hours. They're showering in, there's no other word for it, pouring in threes and fours, and they're fluttering down in perfect formation, just the way we've seen it on the newsreels, the way we've seen it done in exercises, and here they're doing it the real thing, and believe me, they haven't come any too late. There'll be a very unpleasant surprise to the enemy, who's fighting. I can still see the signs of a typical panzer battle. You can hear the aircraft roaring over me, I expect, as I speak. I can still see the signs of a typical panzer battle being raged on the slightly high ground just about 3 or 4 miles ahead of me.
To reach the palisade, I joined a column who were wading across a slough. The water came nearly to their armpits, and they had to hold their rifles and equipment over their heads. The water was rather warm, but the bottom was a slimy mess. When a man got to the far side of the slough, he would always stop in a maddening way, holding the rest of us up. We shouted angrily, but when we got there, each one of us stopped too. The reeds on the far bank were loaded with mines. One man lay at the top of the bank dead. The mines had been marked with bits of paper, and soldiers at the top advised just how to climb so as not to venture into dangerous ground. There were more dead men along the narrow path which led up the palisade. Suddenly a voice said, "Watch yourself, fella, that's a mine." A soldier sprawled on the bank was speaking. He had one foot half blown off. He'd stepped on a mine a short time earlier. Now, while he waited for litter bearers, he was warning other soldiers about other mines in that vicinity. I took a last look at the greatest armada in history before going on the flat. It was too immense to describe.
I'm lying down at full length here in the cornfield. Just in the hedges around me, I can see many men taking shelter behind the banks wearing their steel helmets, while the terrific barrage goes on around us.
That ended with, well, with this, the end of the day, all those reporters covering live D-Day with the planes flying above them, the bombs exploding around them, the gunshots that you could hear on the recordings. The day ended successfully, and all of Europe at the end of that day heard the voice of the future president, then the Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight Eisenhower, give this address.
People of Western Europe, a landing was made this morning on the coast of France by troops of the Allied Expeditionary Force. This landing is part of the concerted United Nations plan for the liberation of Europe, made in conjunction with our great Russian allies. I have this message for all of you. Although the initial assault may not have been made in your own country, the hour of your liberation is approaching. All patriots, men and women, young and old, have a part to play in the achievement of final victory. To members of resistance movements, whether led by nationals or by outside leaders, I say, follow the instructions you have received. To patriots who are not members of organized resistance groups, I say, continue your passive resistance, but do not needlessly endanger your lives. Wait until I give you the signal to rise and strike the enemy. The day will come when I shall need your united strength. Until that day, I call on you for the hard task of discipline and restraint. Citizens of France, I am proud to have again under my command the gallant forces of France. Fighting beside their allies, they will play a worthy part in the liberation of their homeland. Because the initial landing has been made on the soil of your country, I repeat to you with even greater emphasis my message to the peoples of other occupied countries in Western Europe. Follow the instructions of your leaders. A premature uprising of all Frenchmen may prevent you from being of maximum help to your country in the critical hour. Be patient. Prepare. As Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, there is imposed on me the duty and responsibility of taking all measures necessary to the prosecution of the war. Prompt and willing obedience to the orders that I shall issue is essential.
That was Dwight David Eisenhower. On this day, 80 years ago, the greatest military force ever assembled on planet Earth, the combined united free nations of the world, storming into Europe on the beaches of Normandy, beginning the liberation of Europe, the freeing of a continent, and the end of the Second World War.
Ideal mesmo para o mundo atual seria fazer o ensino médio junto com o curso técnico, certo? É no Senac que o aluno tem autonomia de verdade, formação cidadã, foco na diversidade, preparação para o Enem, material didático sem taxas e muito mais. Na real, tem tudo que você precisa para se sentir preparado para a vida. Seja para entrar no mundo do trabalho ou te ajudar a decidir o que fazer na faculdade. Quer saber? Senac. Vem comigo! Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino-médio-técnico.
Breaking news, a federal judge has just ordered Steve Bannon to report to prison to begin serving his prison sentence after he lost some appeals regarding his conviction. We'll see if that happens or if he's able to get an injunction from a court of appeals. Right now, let's go to the phones, 877-973-7425. Logan in Green Cove Springs, Florida. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Great.
So, right when I tuned in, I heard, the D-Day messages that you were saying. I just felt compelled to share. I was an Army aviator for 7 years, and I actually flew support for D-Day 75, 5 years ago, and they called it the last victory, the last farewell, because essentially, unfortunately, every D-Day participant has probably died of old age, natural causes by now. But it was probably the greatest thing that I ever did in my entire military career. We landed at the American Cemetery to place enablers in, to usher the people in for the event that President Biden did today at 6:30 in the morning, which is exactly when the ramps dropped. I got to walk in the same waters that two of my grandfathers did back 75 years prior on Omaha Beach. I saw Point Du Hoc, and it was a really surreal, really moving experience. And I do encourage anybody in the listening area to, if you get a chance, go to Normandy, France, be in that area on the 6th of June, because they, in that region, they absolutely love Americans and American soldiers. We helped liberate them, and there are.
Yeah, look,
just felt compelled to call after I heard.
I do want to say actually that there are still some people who participated in D-Day alive, and Delta United and American Airlines all worked together to fly all the survivors they could find to Normandy, and in fact, they all landed there so they didn't have to go to Paris and take a bus. But yeah, it's a fantastic place to go. A beautiful country, but my gosh, is it eerie to go? The craters are still in the ground. All the craters of the bombs, and it's just the cemetery. It's remarkable. Old Glory Bank, I need to tell you about them. They're my bank. Old Glory Bank can get you a fee-free checking or savings account. Got good interest rates. You can do mortgages. You can do loans. They're my bank. I started using Old Glory Bank about a year ago. I heard about them. Some friends started them, some conservatives who are concerned about debanking trends in the country as conservatives are targeted and banks are being pushed to go woke. And so they started this great conservative bank. And it is a real bank with incredible innovations in their apps and their debit card features, in their online bill pay and budgeting features. They're really, really great. You can take less than 8 minutes to get an account for you or your kids. OldGloryBank.com. OldGloryBank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. But y'all, Old Glory Bank is a fantastic bank. It is my bank. Deeply, highly innovative. You can even deposit cash, even though it's an online bank. They've made it that easy. I highly recommend them. OldGloryBank.com. Get an account for you, for your kids, for your family. Hello and welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number 877-973-7425. I got to read you this. I don't mean to wrestle up Hillary Clinton for you, but I think you need to hear this. Hillary Clinton tweeted this today. 80 years ago today, thousands of brave Americans fought to protect democracy on the shores of Normandy. This November, all we have to do is vote. Hillary Clinton is comparing Donald Trump and his supporters to Nazis. That's what's going on here. Hillary Clinton is comparing Donald Trump and his supporters to Nazis on D-Day. They really do hate you. I mean, Joe Biden, first of all, you know, so they're having a lot of blowback. We talked about yesterday on the show, the Wall Street Journal story, that Joe Biden is beginning to slip. There was this weird scene in Normandy. Now, obviously, there's no words here, but what I'm watching on the screen as you hear this is Joe Biden is turning around,
distinguished guests,
trying
please
to
welcome
sit.
The Honorable Lloyd J. Austin.
I guess there's a chair there or something, but Jill Biden is covering her face. Jill is covering her face to Joe to try to tell him he's got to stand up, and he's not sure what he's doing. And in his speech, he said this.
Now the question for us is, in our hour of trial, will we do ours? We're living in a time when democracy is more at risk across the world than any point since the end of World War II, since these beaches were stormed in 1944. Now we have to ask ourselves, will we stand against tyranny, against evil, against crushing brutality of the iron fist? Will we stand for freedom? Will we defend democracy? Will we stand together? My answer is yes, and only can be yes.
One more.
Because if we do, Ukraine will be subjugated, and it will not end there. Ukraine's neighbors will be threatened. All of Europe will be threatened. And make no mistake, the autocrats of the world are watching closely to see what happens in Ukraine, to see if we let this illegal aggression go unchecked. We cannot let that happen. To surrender to bullies, to bow down to dictators, is simply unthinkable.
We can leave Joe Biden there. Here's my problem with Joe Biden speaking and the way the media reacted to it is there was a great rush to say he was subtly hinting about Donald Trump. And whether you like Donald Trump or not, in his remarks at D-Day 75, he avoided raw American politics in a speech, and Joe Biden just can't help himself. The left cannot help themselves. They are so committed to the fact that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy that they've tried to take him off the ballot through non-democratic purposes, attacked a unanimous Supreme Court, and tried to destroy its credibility for not allowing them to do it. They'll stop at nothing. They are who they say he is. And in the meantime, what do we have to deal with? We have to deal with a world on fire. Russia did not invade Ukraine while Donald Trump was there. They waited for Joe Biden. In fact, Vladimir Putin says Joe Biden is who they want as president because he's more predictable. Xi Jinping has surrounded Taiwan with a naval blockade as a show of force with Joe Biden as president. North Korea is launching balloons filled with poop into South Korea and missiles. The Houthi are shutting down shipping lanes in the Red Sea, and Joe Biden's doing nothing. He's emboldened the Iranians. The world's on fire, not because of Donald Trump, but because of Joe Biden and his ilk. And the best Joe Biden can do is scream and complain about democracy under assault in this country when it's Joe Biden and the left who did a show trial of Donald Trump in New York with a judge who gave money to a fund called Stop Trump and His Right-Wing Legacy, who didn't recuse himself from that trial, who was told by other judges, no, you can go on and oversee the trial of the man who you gave money to stop. It's Joe Biden who is prosecuting Donald Trump in federal court in Washington, D.C. and in South Florida. And now it is Joe Biden and his ilk who are trying to undermine the federal courts because they're not getting their way. At the Supreme Court or with Judge Cannon in Florida, they're attacking Judge Cannon. They're attacking the Supreme Court because they're not getting their way. They're trying to undermine the legitimacy of those institutions, and they think that Donald Trump and his supporters are threats to the republic. They can't keep their politics out of it. Joe Biden went to Europe to honor the men who liberated Europe and ended a war 80 years ago, and instead he had to turn it into a campaign event for himself against Donald Trump. It's a level of narcissism and self-absorption that Donald Trump often gets accused of, and Joe Biden's the one who actually did it. And the world is less safe now with Joe Biden in charge. That's objectively true. And it's something that Democrats, they try to run hypotheticals about and say, no. Vladimir Putin wanted Donald Trump. Vladimir Putin wants Donald Trump. The world was in terrible shape with Donald Trump, except Vladimir Putin didn't invade Ukraine when Trump was president. When Iran was causing us trouble, Donald Trump wiped out Qasem Soleimani. The Houthi rebels of Yemen were on defense because Donald Trump was giving the Saudis the weapons necessary to take them on, and Joe Biden curtailed the weapons and took the Houthi off the terror list. The Houthi are now disrupting shipping in the Red Sea, something that didn't happen when Donald Trump was president. These are all objective facts. You may not like them if you're a Democrat, but they're objective facts. China was not as aggressive against Taiwan when Donald Trump was president. They weren't surrounding Taiwan and engaging in military exercises. The North Koreans were not threatening war with South Korea when Donald Trump was president of the United States. North Korea has now decided that it is no longer going to seek peace with South Korea, but will remain in a state of war. That's with Joe Biden as president that they've done that. This is objectively true. This is truth. You cannot dispute it. These things are true. Not your truth, not my truth, but they are the truth. And they all happen while Joe Biden is president of the United States. So Hillary Clinton can tweet that democracy is under attack now, like with the Nazis in Europe, but all we have to do is vote now. And remind you, she's the one who came up with the label deplorable. She's the one who said Donald Trump supporters were deplorable. They hate you. Joe Biden is the one who constantly says democracy is under assault, while Joe Biden himself proceeds to undermine democracy. They hate you. The left hates you. They talk about right-wing threats. The Southern Poverty Law Center is out again with another report on right-wing threats. You know, the Southern Poverty Law Center has not done anything about anti-Semitic groups out there. You have anti-Semites in this country blocking Jews from libraries, and the left is unperturbed. You have the left in this country harassing conservatives. Look at Jack Phillips. Jack Phillips is a baker in Aurora, Colorado. Jack Phillips will not bake a cake for you if it's your second wedding, if it's a wedding from divorce, because he believes marriage is sacrosanct between a man and a woman and you shouldn't get divorced. So he won't make you a wedding cake for your second wedding. Jack Phillips won't make a cake for Halloween because he considers it a pagan holiday. Jack Phillips does not want to make a cake for a gay wedding because he believes marriage is between a man and a woman. And he doesn't want to make a cake for a transition ceremony because he believes men cannot become women and women cannot become men. He's right on that fact. So the gay rights groups harassed him. He was accused of being a Nazi, like Hillary Clinton now accusing her political opponents of being Nazis. Jack Phillips was considered a Nazi because he wouldn't bake a cake. They hate you. Jack Phillips is in court again because a transgender activist lawyer decided to sue him for his refusal to make a transition ceremony cake. They hate you. Barronelle Stutzman's florist shop is shut down in the state of Oregon. Barronelle Stutzman was a florist. She had a large gay clientele. One of the gay couples that were pre-existing customers of hers asked her to prepare flowers for their wedding, and she said she was very sorry she couldn't. She was a Christian and believes that marriage is between a man and a woman. They did not do anything other than one of them vented on Facebook. The Attorney General in Oregon took it upon himself as a campaign matter to shut down her business, taking her retirement fund, taking her dog, taking all of her livelihood away from her because she refused to provide flowers for a gay wedding. They hate you. If you want to understand the antagonisms that are going on in American society right now, consider the failure of the media to be honest and the failure of the left to acknowledge how much they actually hate you. They don't really think you're a threat to democracy. They just don't want you to have power. They want the power. They'll undermine Sam Alito on the Supreme Court for a flag his wife flew, but don't you dare question Judge Merchan giving money to stop Donald Trump. They'll undermine Eileen Cannon, the judge in Florida, because her rulings are going against the prosecution, but don't you say anything about the rulings of the judge in New York, because they hate you. And this is why so many people on the right have been driven to existential terror about the left being in charge, because the left is very open about their hate for people on the right. I was reading an article this morning about a guy who lives in a red state. His sister will not come visit him because he lives in a conservative state. Look at the Hollywood folks when Georgia passed its fetal heartbeat legislation, decided that they would boycott Georgia and stop doing business in Georgia. There are musicians who refuse to perform in Atlanta because it's a red state. There are musicians who refuse to perform in Texas because it's a red state. They hate you. And the left is perfectly fine boycotting you. They want to boycott Israel and they want to boycott red states. But you don't like it? Well, that's on you. It's your problem. They hate you. There's a massive, massive division in this country between the left and the right. You know, and I get it. Those of you on the right who don't want to associate with people on the left anymore, I see someone this morning on social media. I don't know, just a random person on social media, but is furious with Senator Ted Cruz because he shook hands with Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks and said, those are the men who are the leftists destroying this country. How could you shake their hands? Well, you know, just forgive me. I'm a Christian, but I believe you got to love your neighbor, and there's no exception for someone's politics you don't like. We should be able to be friendly and just politically disagree with people and not have it dictate our lives. But on the left, it's harder and harder. They really do hate you. They blame you. They don't want to share a country with you. And increasingly, I understand so many of you don't want to share a country with them. But, you know, there's not going to be a national divorce, as some like Marjorie Taylor Greene have called for. There's not. There could be violence in this country. And I would say that violence comes from the top. When you've got the Democrats so convinced Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, you've got Barack Obama tells his followers to take guns to knife fights and get in neighbors' faces and argue with them. You've got Joe Biden out there dripping with contempt for Trump voters. You've got Hillary Clinton comparing them to Nazis. This doesn't end well for any of us. And they could tone down the rhetoric themselves and just make it a simple disagreement about the direction of the country. But they can't do that. They want people to know that they believe their opponents are Nazis, that you are Nazis. If you support Donald Trump, you're a Nazi. It can't just be a disagreement. You must be the worst thing ever, because they need to drive antagonism towards Donald Trump and shame people into not voting for him. And the way they've decided to shame people into not voting for him is to call him and his supporters Nazis and to make you deplorable and to make you radioactive for people to have relationships with. You got to love your neighbor. They don't seem to know that. They call themselves Christians and themselves don't want to practice the faith. There's going to be a reckoning, and it's not going to be pretty. And if Donald Trump does win, it's going to be the left that's violent. Donald Trump was found guilty in a court of law in New York for 34 acts. There's been no rioting and no city burned down. If Donald Trump wins in November, you and I both know that there are going to be cities burning down. And you believe me that by the time we get to November, the left is going to use that as a way to convince you to reject Donald Trump, that if you vote for him, your cities will burn. That's going to be their mantra by the end if he's still ahead in the polling. There's a lot of polling coming out after the verdict. He's still ahead. They're going to use that, and they're going to scare you, and they're going to claim that cities will burn if you vote for this man, so you better think twice about it. And that actually should be your incentive to go vote for Donald Trump. They hate you. Give them their medicine by not supporting what they want. All right. I guess we should move on. Jim, where am I? Eden Pure. That's right. I know where I am, folks. My computer's not pulling up. What's the next thing I got to tell you about? It's the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. The 3-pack available right now. You save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. You put in discount code Eric3. Now, I will have one with me this next week. I keep it in my travel bag, and I'm glad I am. My sister actually texted me and reminded me, don't forget your Eden Pure. True story. Did this just a little while ago because I'm got to be in Louisiana next week. I'm broadcasting from over there, and I'm staying in a shack that was built in the late 1800s, and they brag about it's all the original stuff from the 1800s, which means it's going to be a little musty smelling. So I'll have my Eden Pure Thunderstorm because it wipes out those odors. Smoke odors, litter box odors, pet odors, musty odors. It wipes them out. It really does the trick, and it's small. You can travel with it. You can hold it in your hand, plug it up with a USB cord, or plug it up directly into the wall. You can get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms and save $200. EdenPureDeals.com. Eden, like the Garden of Eden, pure as the driven snow. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code ERIC3, ERICK3, if I can spell my own name. EdenPureDeals.com. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I am happy to have you. Just resetting for those of you who weren't here. So I last Thursday, we were in Las Vegas for the family. And you know, I feel kind of guilty if I'm honest with you, because normally I don't take a lot of vacation and I spread it over the year. But with my daughter graduating high school this year and going to college, we took spring break, and then we had our family trip right after Memorial Day. So 2 close weeks off, and I feel bad about that for you guys, but I'm got to spend family time, otherwise wouldn't get to spend with. But we're in Las Vegas last week on Thursday. I'm in a restaurant, and I'm eating, I want to say it was bread. It wasn't anything hard. I wasn't chewing ice or anything like that. And I taste a little blood in my mouth. Something, I don't know. No big deal. But by the end of the day, I had a headache. And it started at the base of my ear on the left side of my head. It could wrap around, like I could physically touch, and it was sore. And it would go away when I went to sleep, and in the morning, it would come back. By the end of the day, it was just a roaring headache. And it got worse on Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday. So Monday after the show, I'm like, this is kind of odd having this headache. And like, it would go away at night. When I wake up in the morning, it wasn't there. And by the end of the day, it would be just full miserable headache. So I went to the doctor, and he's like, I think it might be like a jaw issue or your tooth. Go to the dentist. So I went to the dentist yesterday morning at 8 a.m. They took 2 x-rays. And immediately say, oh, you got to have oral surgery. You've got an infection in your jaw. And they showed me the x-ray. And I mean, I'm not an expert at reading x-rays, but I could definitely tell there was something weird. And so they call an oral surgeon, send all the x-rays. The oral surgeon's office calls and says, you gotta have this, and you got to have it like now. That's how bad it is. And I'm like, well, I got to do radio. And they're like, well, we're going to get you in at some point today, so you go do radio, but we're going to call you, and when we call you, you're going to have to go have surgery. So I did the first hour of the show. They call me. I leave here. I have to leave in the middle of the show, 1 o'clock, get over to the surgery facility at 1:20, and they thought they were going to have to put me under anesthesia. They wound up not having to. They just they numbed everything, sedated me a little bit, and took out a tooth and a chunk of tissue they said was dying and infected and disgusting, and lots of fluid came out. Ugh. But my head hasn't hurt since, y'all. I haven't had a headache since yesterday afternoon. My mouth is still bleeding as I talk, but I'm okay, and it doesn't hurt terribly. In any event, much better on the mend. Glad to be here. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. If you're buying a building, buying a franchise, need an equipment loan, First Liberty might be able to help you. Reach out to them. FirstLibertyGA.com. FirstLibertyGA.com. Tell them I sent you. When we come back, did you hear this? The FBI has now fully validated Hunter Biden's laptop. It wasn't Russian disinformation. It was real the whole time.